Mini-episode 545 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.info.
The FDH Lounge. You'll want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
We have our guest on the phone lines with us. It is going to be a pleasure to bring on one of our favorite recurring guests over a period of time, good friend of the show. You can catch him middays in New York on the vaunted WFAN, the greatest sports talk station in the country, I think most would say, where he co-hosts a show with another of our past guests on the show, Joe Benigno, and you can catch him these days increasingly across various CBS Sports properties, CBS Sports, of course, being the mothership for WFAN. I speak, of course, of, as I say, good friend of the show, someone we always enjoy talking to, Evan Roberts from WFAN in New York. Evan, how you doing in Indianapolis tonight, my man?
Oh, fantastic. I just landed. It was raining. It's god-awful. I actually left a beautiful New York City to come here. I don't know why.
Well, being on America's North Coast, we get a lot of the same weather blowing across. So, yeah, I could have told you that was going to be the case in Indy. I can tell you this. You will be watching games at a tremendous facility this weekend here. I've been there for the Big Ten football championship, and I don't know if you've witnessed any events inside of Lucas Oil Stadium previously, but if you have, I'm sure you would agree it's a fine facility.
Oh, it's one of the best. I've been here now 3 football games. I saw the Jets lose the AFC Championship in the 2009 season, calendar year 2010. What a great memory that was. I saw them beat the Colts the following year in the first round. That actually was a great memory. And then I saw the Giants beat the Patriots in a Super Bowl where I really didn't want either team to win. So I've seen Lucas Oil. It's a wonderful place. I can't imagine that there are that many good seats to watch a basketball game, but nevertheless, I've had some decent to awful memories of watching my football team play here.
Yeah, you're right about that. No question about it. It's more suited towards football, but this is the day and age we live in where heaven forfend that there is a Final Four that does not take place in a dome, and some might say that may have a deleterious effect on the athletes. You go back a couple of years in Atlanta with Kevin Ware of Louisville. There was some thought at the time, and I don't know if it was ever substantiated, but that fall that he took, it was almost like he was bracing himself not to go off the edge of the platform, because it's basically like falling into the orchestra pit when you're there at Broadway. You don't want to have that happen. So I don't know if there's increased physical danger to it, but they do that, of course, so that the cheap seats are a little bit less cheap. But as you say, Evan, that only goes so far with basketball.
Well, I think it's amazing that people, and I get it's the Final Four and it's a big event, it's amazing that people will spend any amount of money to actually sit where you look at the basketball players and their ants. I mean, it's one thing to watch a football game from the top row. I've done it. It's actually not a bad seat. Basketball, it's got to be – it's like watching a WrestleMania or a wrestling event that high up. I would never do it because what the hell can you see? Aren't you pretty much watching the game on the monitors anyway?
Absolutely, and that very topic is one that we're going to be touching on shortly here as well. With the basketball first, in looking at that, I have to say, again, here on America's North Coast, we saw what will probably go down, I would think, as the game of the tournament this past weekend. Kentucky and Notre Dame. Of course, Kentucky still has 2 obstacles left in its way to go 40-0, but there's a very good chance that game is going to be regarded as the closest that they came to stubbing their toe. What have you been thinking watching this run that they've had through what seemed to be a very stacked bracket, maybe the most stacked of the 4, and running the field through the SEC previously? I mean, Kentucky, they've had a couple of different classes the last couple of years where this has been expected, but it really seems like another thing altogether to actually watch this happen.
Well, you watch them, and they're just better than everybody else. It's as simple as that. I mean, when Karl Anthony Towns, we're not even getting to really see what Karl Anthony Towns is. I mean, if he was switching places with Jahlil Okafor, I think we would be hearing a lot of different things about Towns because his role is kind of, in a weird way, diminished on such a deep, good team. They're the best team. The one thing, though, that we saw is that on any given day, as Notre Dame almost pulled off, they can be beat. And I think Wisconsin certainly has the makeup and the talent to pull off the upset, but they're the best team in the country. And it's a pleasure watching them because it's been such a long time since we've seen a team march through the regular season and the tournament and complete the perfect undefeated season. I mean, seeing Wichita State get to the tournament is one thing, but being able to march through it the way they have, and they have faced adversity. I mean, there were a few times during the regular season where the streak was in danger, and obviously not too long ago, but they're the best team in the country, and it's actually kind of a pleasure watching them, even though, half the roster is going to be in the NBA next year.
They are, and along those lines, I have to ask you a kind of a side note here as a WFAN talk show host, if there's been any increased chatter the last week. Of course, the Knicks long ago threw their hat in the ring for the number one pick in the draft this coming June, and Karl Anthony Towns, I think a lot of people have gotten the sense that maybe even before the Notre Dame game that he was moving past Okafor and some of the others possibly as the number one pick. He does seem to have a little bit more offensive upside than Okafor, to be sure. Our FDH Director of Research, Nate Noy, has actually compared him to a young mailman Malone. So is there an increased excitement and chatter in New York about the possibility of getting a guy like that to play for the Knicks? I mean, I know the Nets are your team, but what are you hearing as far as excitement?
Yeah, the Nets don't actually have a draft pick until 2040, so we don't actually get to talk about drafting players. We mortgage that all to Boston. So, yeah, I think that I'm not even exaggerating here. I think 90% of the college basketball phone calls we get are about who the Knicks are going to take. I'm not even kidding you. Like the entire tournament is really the Knicks Invitational. It's about, okay, do they get – and first of all, we don't know if they're going to win the lottery. I mean, they may end up picking number 2, which sometimes can be a blessing in disguise. Just look at the Greg Oden, Kevin Durant draft. Sometimes not getting to make the choice actually benefits you. But it seems like most Knicks fans are just content with either guy, that if they did finish second in the lottery, which seems possible and probably likely because if you finish with the worst record in the NBA, the odds usually say you're not going to get the first overall pick. I think it's been a decade since we've seen it. But I think most Knicks fans are content with either guy. D'Angelo Russell's another guy that's very, very impressive. Emmanuel Mudiay doesn't get talked about as much, obviously, because he's not playing. He's in China and nobody's gotten to see him play. So I think there's been a lot of debate about it. There's even been debate about Phil trading the pick, which I think for most Knicks fans is sacrilegious, but it's out there. I mean, names like DeMarcus Cousins and even Kevin Durant before the foot injury entertaining the idea of, hey, would Sacramento make a deal like that? Would Thunder make a deal like that? And the fact that Phil Jackson wants to win right now, and he's got Carmelo Anthony coming off a knee injury and being in his 30s, that there is that worry that maybe the Knicks actually may not even use the pick to draft a player and may draft a player and then immediately trade the guy for a more proven commodity. But I think right now most Knicks fans, the impression I get is, hey, Okafor, Towns, either way, they'd be pretty happy.
Yeah, based on what they got on the roster now, no question about it. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that for once I don't think anybody's going to have to worry about my Cleveland Cavaliers yoinking the number one pick. I think that streak is probably over this year.
Congratulations on that, by the way.
Yes, thank you. I prefer it this way, let me tell you. But as far as it goes with the basketball this weekend, there's been some thought back and forth here that in terms of the teams that could possibly beat Kentucky as you look at it through the course of a season. Like seemingly most people, I actually had Arizona coming out of the West, not Wisconsin, and I thought they would give Kentucky a good tussle. But Wisconsin's another team, obviously, people have been pointing to, them being a number one seed. They're obviously on that short list. How do you see them stacking up vis-a-vis what they were able to do last year? Wisconsin brings back a lot of experience, obviously, but Kentucky has an even more talented team on paper, no question.
Well, look, Kentucky's going to be more talented than anybody they face, but I think Wisconsin, if you, before this tournament, took a look at all the teams and said, all right, who's got the best chance to knock off Kentucky? I always thought it would be Wisconsin. With that said, I, like you, had Arizona knocking them off before we even got to this game. So, in a weird way, even though my bracket is screwed, I'm actually kind of glad that we're getting this matchup because this is the team that I thought had the best chance to knock them off. I think the experience that they have is a big thing. The one thing about this Kentucky team, obviously, and I know they have it with the Harrisons, they have a lot of young guys on it, as does Duke, but Duke's kind of grown up as this tournament's gone on. I think Wisconsin has the makeup to knock them off. The question is, can Kentucky, coming off a game in which they were beatable, I mean, listen, Notre Dame makes one or two plays, they win that game. You kind of have the bad feeling if you're rooting against them that Kentucky comes out and plays an A-plus game, an effort like we saw against West Virginia not too long ago. But I thought before the tournament, based on the talent, the experience, the style that they have, that Wisconsin actually has the best chance to knock them off. But best chance doesn't mean you do it. Having the best chance to do it doesn't mean you're actually going to do it, and I don't think they will.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said right there. I think they may have the best chance, relatively speaking. But yeah, we'll see. We'll have to see what that counts for. You've got that one stacking up, and seemingly again, the committee rooting for the outcome here, as they seem to be when they were putting the seeds together, potentially a Kentucky-Duke national championship. They always love to invoke the 92 game, as has been done a lot this year, and with the recent ESPN special. First, Duke has to get past Michigan State. One of the great coaching jobs, and it's hard to single out just one or two, but one of Tom Izzo's probably his least talented team on paper that he's brought to the Final Four. But does not that side of the bracket show us, Evan, just how much, again, Kentucky, teams like that, yes, recruiting, athleticism, et cetera, it is dominant in today's game. But for most of the rest of the teams, it still looks like coaching is every bit as big of a deal if you don't have that kind of physical haul to throw out on the floor there, because Duke's got a pretty talented team, but Michigan State, it was hard to believe at the beginning of this tournament that they might make it this far, albeit I thought, and a lot of people did, that was a weak bracket for them to come through.
I picked them to go to the Final Four, and I'm not saying because I'm a soothsayer. I certainly aren't. I mean, I'm done in all of my brackets, so I'm no expert.
Okay.
I picked Michigan State for one reason, and that is they have, pound for pound, the best coach on the planet, and Tom Izzo. He may not be the recruiter that John Calipari is. I understand that. But like you said, I mean, he's done this before where we've seen Michigan State teams that may not have the most talent in the world, but they somehow, some way, go on a magical run. And that's the only reason I picked them, to be perfectly honest with you, because watching them, you know, the few times I was able to in the Big Ten, I never came away impressed. I never walked away and said, boy, that's a championship caliber team. But they have a championship caliber coach. And, you know, here's the thing about Duke. And you're right. If you want to be skeptical of everything and you want to be a conspiracy theorist, I can't argue with the way that side of the bracket looks. I can't, because you're right. It was basically the Duke Invitational. It was basically, we're going to give Duke one of the easiest rides. Now, I'm not a conspiracy guy, and I hope that wasn't the case, but I can't argue with you. I'm not equipped to argue with you because of the way the bracket looked, because of how easy the road actually was. So I'll give you that, but now Coach K's got to deal with Tom Izzo, and clearly this has been some type of run for him. It may not be quite done yet, even though, again, Duke's got the more talented team, but it has been amazing what Izzo's been able to pull off, and I would take him to coach my team over anybody else because I think he gets the most out of the least, and it's one of the most impressive jobs we've seen.
Absolutely. In terms of on-court coaching, he appears to be the gold standard right now, and particularly with what he's gotten out of them. If we agree that Kentucky is certainly pretty likely to be there Monday night, do you agree with me that it's probably Duke that's likely to be standing in their way then, or do you think Michigan State has any kind of a real chance to pull this one off?
They have a real chance to pull it off, but if you're making me put money on the line, I'm taking Duke. And you know what? Even though Duke and Kentucky aren't exactly the most likable teams in the world, I think it would be a very fun championship game to watch, if not just for the individual matchup of, you know, the two guys that may go number one overall. And I was saying this on the air the other day. Sometimes we remember things differently. Sometimes we look back at things differently. Let's say it's Duke against Kentucky, and let's say Okafor and Towns go 1-2, and let's say the top two teams picking are, let's say, the New York Knicks and the LA Lakers, and let's say somewhere along the line in the next 10 years the Knicks and Lakers play each other in the NBA Finals. I think that championship game would become even more legendary because we'll talk about the birthplace of the great rivalry between Towns and Okafor in a sort of similar light to Bird and Magic. So I think that having those two guys and those two teams facing each other in a championship game could set the tone for maybe the next great rivalry. Now, a lot can happen on the way. I mean, we saw what happened with Greg Oden when we thought Oden and Durant were going to be like these two amazing NBA players, and obviously Greg Oden, you know, decided to show himself naked and obviously can't stay healthy. So his legacy is a heck of a lot different than Kevin Durant is. But this championship game has the potential to kind of set the stage for the next great rivalry and the next great, thing we talk about for generations. If these guys turn out to be great players, and if these guys turn out to go to, kind of marquee teams like the Knicks and Lakers, and dare I say face each other once or twice in an NBA Finals.
Well, that's an excellent point, because I have seen comparisons recently when people were talking about what the ratings might be Monday night, that possibly the highest since the Magic Bird game of 79. And, that ties into it directly. And if that's the case, if there is that much attention paid to the game, if the ratings are at that point, I wouldn't think, Evan, that it would take too much for the media to start planting the seeds of the rivalry right then and there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think where they go obviously has a big impact on it. And if you are a conspiracy guy, which you are with Duke, you would then probably assume the Knicks and Lakers pick 1-2 in the NBA draft, right?
Yep. Well, it couldn't be a frozen envelope anymore, but maybe weighted ping pong balls. I don't know exactly how they're fixing things these days. I'm not exactly up on that part. I haven't been tuning into the Alex Jones podcast to learn exactly how the NBA is rigging that, but perhaps I can get clued in on that in the near future.
As we bring the show to a close, we would like to extend our deepest gratitude to NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, all Clear Channel affiliates, TNT, TBS, USA, UPN, Deadspin.com, YouTube.com, YTMND.com, MySpace.com, various blogs, Fox News, CNN, CNBC, MSNBC, IamBoard.com, Billboard.com, Google.com, ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN News, ESPN Classic, NBA TV, NFL Network, Sports Time Ohio, Athlon Magazine, Comedy Central, Cartoon Network, The Boomerang Channel, QVC, BET, The Spice Channel, Steno Notebooks, Manwich, Papermate Office Supplies, waitresses, strippers, bartenders, garbage men, janitors, microwave popcorn, the writers of The Office, Scrubs, Entourage, My Name is Earl, Oz, Metalocalypse and the Boondocks, Aquafina, and the Periodic Table of Elements.